All right, so welcome everybody to the first of what will definitely not be only one. L'chaira is going to be two classes on the topic of astrology and horoscopes in Yiddishkeit. It's interesting because I think that in our community, meaning in the Frum community, I don't think this stuff is much of a thing. And what's interesting about that is that it is very much a thing in the world at large, meaning every American newspaper has a column, a horoscope column, and they don't do it for nothing. They do it because people are because people are interested in it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. It's a huge business, and there are studies and data about millions of Americans who are interested in this. And sometimes, very often, when the larger society is involved in something, it trickles down into the Frum community, and we start seeing, like football, baseball, basketball. But for whatever reason, and this is I don't have any sophisticated thoughts on this. This is not something that has trickled down into the Frum community. It's very rare. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it's rare to find a Frum Jew who's interested in this or passionate about this or is very into that. So that's just something to think about of why that is so, despite the fact that there is this wide interest in this topic today. But anyway, as we're going to see, the status quo was not always the case. There was a time when Jews were very involved in this field of study and very interested in it, and that's something that has been a big dispute. Much later, I'll show you a minor of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe says how there was a huge debate amongst the Chachamim about this topic, and you'll see and understand how this all developed. So it's going to take a while for all of this to come together, and that's why, again, as I said, we're not going to finish today. We'll begin today, and we'll continue next week as well. Just one more point before we get into it. There's some basic English words, I find this interesting, that are related to astrological concepts. So number one, the flu is going around. What's the origin of the word flu? The word flu, 100 years ago, they called it, it's the abbreviation of the word influenza. Influenza is the Italian word. What does it mean? And so it sounds very similar to the word influence, and indeed, it was related to the word influence. The theory was, and the saying was, that the disease came from the influence of a bad star, which is what astrology is all about. So the word that we use today, flu, coming from influenza, which comes from the word influence, is a clear astrological term. So that's number one. Number two, there's a term, a basic English word called disaster. Welcome to Paris. Yes. There's a basic disaster. What does disaster mean? So we know that an astro is a star, like astronaut or the Houston Astros or whatever it is, right? So disaster, in the beginning of a word, is often means shlila, like I'm disinterested or something like that, right? So shlila, disaster meant a shlila dika star. And the theory was, and the understanding was, that the bad event that happened in the world was also as a result of a negative star that occurred. This is in the English language. As you'll see, the basic term that we use in Yiddishkeit, mazel tov, is also the hepech of disaster. Mazel tov means there should be a good mazel. We'll see, it's all from the same thing. All right, but let's go back, way back to this week's parsha. This week's parsha is Parshas Boy. And in Parshas Boy, we have this pasuk, Shmois Yud Yud, which is the first source in the sheet. Vashtei Tartan. Moshe Rabbeinu had just told Paroi that we're leaving with everyone. Binareinu, Biskanenu, we're all going together. So he says, Hayoymer Aleim, Paroi said to the Moshe and Aaron, this, by the way, is one of the hardest psukim in Parshas Boy. Pashas and Pshat, understand the Pshat. Yehi chein Hashem imachem, kasher ashalach eschem ve'estapchem. May God be with you when or if I send you together with your children. Which it's an ironic way or a sarcastic way of saying it. Like, may God be with you if I send you, meaning I'm befedish not sending you and your children. Okay. Then he says, Re'u ki ra'a neget pneichem. See that there's negativity in your faces or something like that. What does this word mean? Re'u ki ra'a neget pneichem. Zok Rashi in text 2. Re'u ki ra'a neget pneichem ketarguma. You want to know what it means? Go to the Targum. You go to the Targum, then you'll understand what it means. The Targum Onkelos, we're used to Onkelos he stays very close to the words of the Torah. It's almost like if it said one word, he's going to give you the one word in Aramaic. Well, here is an exception, and it's an exception because it's such a vague term. And the Targum has a full sentence here. I put it in the footnote in number 1. You'll see Targum says Arebisha asun svidin lemevad leis kabel apechon listachora, which in Aramaic means you are thinking about doing bad. It is not. Your faces show that you don't plan on returning. That's what it means. I see that you plan on doing something bad. What's the bad? I see in your faces that you're not coming back. That's the way the Targum Onkelos interprets the Classic, which again, because he says so many words and not giving a direct translation, really shows you how difficult these words are. And maybe that's why the Rashi doesn't suffice with the Targum, but adds another thing, and he says, Medrash Agoda Shamaiti. It's a very interesting lashon. He's not quoting from the Bereichas Rabbah or from the Tanchuma or these Midrashim. He says, I heard an interesting medrash. And here he says, Koichav Echad Yesh Shmoi Ra. There's a certain star, and its name is Ra. That's the name. Amar Lam Parai. Parai said, Roya Ani Be'itstagninus Shali. I see in my astrology, Itstagninus is the Greek term for astrology, so Chazal use that term. Koichav Oila Likraschem, a star rising up toward you, Bamidbar, in the desert. V'usiman Dam Variga, and it symbolizes and represents blood and death. So he's like, you guys want to leave Mitzrayim? We look up in the stars, we see that there's a star rising toward you. What does it mean, rising toward you? Maybe in astrology, there's one star representing the Yidden. And we see another star by the name of Ra rising toward you, so there's a disaster coming your way in the Midbar. So like, why would you want to leave? And when the Yidden did the Egel, and Hashem wanted to annihilate the Jewish people for this sin, what did Moshe say in his prayer? Why should Mitzrayim say Bira'ah hoitziyam? He took them out Bira'ah. That's also a very interesting pasuk. What does it mean Bira'ah? He took them out with evil. What does that mean? So the pshuta is a pshuta. He took them out with an evil intention, but it doesn't go so good in the words. So Rashi is bringing this medrash. He took him out Bira'ah under the star of Ra. While Ra was in control of the destiny of the Jewish people, he took them out under the influence of Ra. Zuish Amar Lam Ruki Ra Neged Pnechem. This is what he's saying. It's like you're going to the desert. The bad star is going to be there. Miyad, what happened? Vayinacham Hashem ala Ra. Eventually, after the Eibusher Moshe pleaded, then there was Vayinacham Hashem ala Ra. What does that mean? God changed. Nacham is you change. Nechama means you change. So God changed the Ra. What does that mean? That instead of the blood being a blood of death, instead it turned into the blood of a bris. Shamo Yeshua Oisam, because this is many years later, where Yeshua gave a bris to the Yidden right before they went into Eretz Yisrael, which is Zeu Shenamar. It says in Yeshua, Hayoim Galoisi Escherpas Mitzrayim Alechem. I took off the cherpa, the shame of Mitzrayim from you. So Pashas means that we're no longer oral. That we're no longer oral. That's what Yeshua meant when he gave the Yidden a bris. Because for the years in the Midbar, many years he didn't have a bris. So here they finally had a bris, so they removed the oral, which was a bizayin that Yid had it. But the deeper pshat is he removed the conspiracy, basically, because there was an astrological conspiracy that the Jews are going to face blood in the Midbar, which would have meant what? Death and disaster. Instead, we interpreted it, we changed it, that it ended up being Dam of the Milah, and so therefore that whole story all went away. This is what Rashi says in the Chumash of the Rishon and the first Aliyah that we have in this week's Parsha. Okay, so obviously, anytime you're going to see a passage about astrology, there's going to be a lot where you don't understand. What does this exactly mean that he sees the star and it symbolizes this? But what we see here is a passage of Paro using his astrologers, and that's one passage. Now, in Parsha Shmos, there's another passage also about Paro. Also, and this one's more famous. Also about the astrologers. What did we have there? In Parashat Shmos it said that Paro commanded l'chol amoy, to all of his people, to kill all the baby boys. And it said l'chol amoy, so it sounds like Rashi's Madai, that it wasn't to kill the Jewish boys, l'chol amoy af alein gazar, also the male of the Egyptians. Why? See, Rashi explains. The day that Moshe was born, Amrullah Itztagninov, the astrologers told him, Hayoim Neilad Moshe. Okay, this is an amazing thing, because they were able to see. They were able to see, Pasha, like you, it's almost like in real time information. They're able to look up in the stars, and they're able to see Neilad Moshe. They went on further to say, we don't know if he's a Jewish boy or a non-Jewish or a Mitzri. That's also an amazing thing. Why? Because that also reflects the truth, the fact that yes, he was born to Jewish parents, but within a few days of being born, he ends up having a non-Jewish mother. So that's amazing accuracy. We see his end's going to come in water, meaning his downfall is going to be by water. So the Fichach, Gazar, Sapari said, so let's make a gzeda today that any child born today will meet his death in water, and so then we'll solve the problem. All children. It doesn't say born to Jews. Okay, so what was the error they made? They didn't realize that it was not going to happen, that he was going to die by drowning. That was not on the table, and it was not going to happen. So this whole plan wouldn't have worked, because he wasn't going to end up to die by drowning. So what was the symbol of his downfall? Would be by water. That at the end it was going to be the Maisa with the rock and with the water and the hitting and the speaking and all of that later in Parshas Chukas, and because of that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't go into Eretz Yisrael, and that's his downfall, and that was the meaning of what happened over here. If you take both of these passages together, you see that we have a little bit of a conflict between two things. On the one hand, both passages lend legitimacy to astrology, because in the first passage, their taka was this star coming to the Jewish people, and the taka was threatening them, and indeed the story of the eagles happened. And the Yidden were about to be destroyed. And he transferred it from this type of blood to another type of blood. So it shows you that what they were saying, what Pare was saying, was serious. And likewise, the second one, as we just stressed, so much about what the astrologers were seeing and saying seems to have been true. However, what do we also see in both passages? We also see in both passages that they don't get it 100% right. There's always something off. There's always something off. In both passages, they got something wrong. That's going to be an important feature later. Anyway, so this is the beginning. These are very famous midrashim about the astrology. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a broader look and see how this plays out in other areas in the Gemara and in the midrashim. That's yours. Oh. Okay. So here, number 4. Here you have a Maisa in the Gemara. The Maisa in the Gemara says as follows. Rav Yosef had the Maila of being Sinai. Sinai is a symbolic of, he has all the knowledge. Just like Sinai, Moshe had all the knowledge, he had all the knowledge. Big Bucky. Rabbah, a contemporary of his, was Oiker Harim. Oiker Harim means sharp. Maybe he didn't have as much information, but his analysis was spot on. Itzrachulu Shaita, so they needed to make a decision. What does it mean they needed to make a decision? The previous Rosh Yeshiva of whichever city in Babel this was had passed away, and they needed to hire one of the two. So now the question becomes, who's the better Rosh Yeshiva? Is it the guy who knows more, or the person who's sharper? Who's the better mashpia? The one who gives a better sheikh chassidus, the one who fabrings better? No, it's not the same conflict, but fine. So Shalchu lahasam. So it's interesting. They sent from Babel to Eretz Yisrael, even though in Babel they had great rabbanim and so on, but they sent to Eretz Yisrael. Sinai va'oker harim. Ezemem koydem. Which one comes first? Shalchu lahu. So they sent back Sinai koydem. The database comes first. Why? Shakel tzrichen lamari chitaya. Everyone needs wheat, and the mushal that's being used over here is that it's like there's basics, and then there's like the dessert. The wheat is the basics, the Sinai. We needed the basic information. The analysis, either you have it or you don't have it, but we need to have Pashat information, what was said in previous generations. We need to retain that memory, and so therefore that comes first. Everyone needs wheat. Aval b'chein, so that, who does that mean? That means that Rav Yosef was supposed to become the Rosh Yeshiva. Aval b'chein lechibel olav Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef did not accept this position. Why? The Omri le Kaldoi, because Kaldoi told him. Kaldoi really just means the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans are a group of people that lived, ancient people that lived in Babel. So it's like saying a Babylonian told him. But when the Gemara uses this word very often, it actually means astrologers, and for good reason, because in Babel there were people who were expert in this area. Just like in Mitzrayim, Parai had his Itztagninov, so too in Babel there were the Chaldeim, and they were expert in this field. So they told him, Malacht trei tarten shnin. You are only going to rule for 2 years. Now, what does it mean you're only going to rule? You're not going to go on vacation after. It didn't work that way, right? Like, if you're only ruling for 2 years, it means that after you're going to die. So he's like, if I only have 2 years to do it, why should I do it now? Then I'll die. I might as well push it off. And so he didn't take the position. Malach Rabba Esem Shnin. Rabba took it and he ruled he had the office for 22 years. And then Malach Rav Yosef after him for Tarti Shnin Upalga. And then the Mashmos says he passed away within the third year, 2.5 years. Here's a very interesting passage we see in Amoira, changing behavior based on an astrologer. That's an amazing thing. An Amoira changing behavior based on an astrologer. Now the passage is vague. Did he go for a reading? Did he go to a psychic and actually discuss it? Or did an astrologer just come over to him and say, hey, Rav Yosef, I have news I'd like to share to you? And we'll see that question is going to come up in future passages as well.
So it's interesting that he got a little bit off.
What was that?
You don't think he got a little bit off.
Here as well, you see it's a little off. Yeah.
Everyone holds Kadei is referring to astrologers?
I believe so, yeah. Okay, number 5. Again, we're just going to be putting out different Talmudic passages. It's going to take a while till we put this all together. Here is what I would call a very troubling shtickle Gemara. It's a famous Gemara, but it's a very troubling Gemara. Let's read it. Moed Kotten Daf Chof Ches. Omar Rava says as follows. Chaye Bani Umezayna. This is the source of the term that we use all the time, where we say, but we do it in a different order. We say, what do we say? Bana Chaye Umezayna. So the source of it comes from this Gemara, where he says these 3 things: Chaye, Pasha, your life and your health; Bane, the family; and Mezayne is Parnasa. Loi b'schus tal yomilsa. You think that if you have schus, like if you're a better Jew, you get more, and if you're a worse Jew, you get less? No, it has nothing to do with your schus. Ella b'mazala tal yomilsa. All it depends on the mazel. This is the first time we're introducing the word mazel. We'll explain what it means in a moment. But for now, it depends on astrology. Astrology dictates your Banei Chayim Azayne, not your schusim. What's his proof? This is Rava. What's his proof? He brings evidence. What's the evidence? You had 2 Amoraim, Rabba and Rav Chisda. Rabba we just mentioned, and Rav Chisda. Tarvayu Rabbanan Tzadikei Havoy. Both of them were tzadikim. How do I know both of them were tzaddikim? Because Mar Metzalei V'Asi Mitra, Mar Metzalei V'Asi Mitra. This one daven and rain came, and this one daven and rain came. In Babel, must have been there was a drought, and so there was a big crisis. And in each case, one of the rabbis davened, and rain happened. So you see the tzidkus of both of them equals chusim. Now here you could say, really, is that enough evidence to say that they're mamish equal in schus? You could start saying, despite that, it could be one was way greater than the other. Okay, but this is what he says. He says they're equal in schus. And now, Rav Chisda lived 92 years. Rabba Chaya Arboin, he lived 40 years. Now remember, Rabba for 22 years was Rosh Yeshiva, so if you do the math, that means 40. He started very young, 18 years old. Okay. Bei Rav Chisda Shitin Hilule. A Hilula, we use that word always as a yahrzeit, but we have to remember that that's not the original meaning of the word. Hilula is a chasana. The vart was that the Rashbi said that on the day that he passes away, you should treat it like a chasana. And so for there we use the word, we appropriated the word from a wedding to a day of passing of a tzaddik. Anyway, so here it means a wedding. Rav Chisda had 60 weddings in his family. I don't know, grandchildren, nephews, who knows. Bei Rabba shitin tichle, 60 destructions. It means deaths or other tragedies that happened in Rabba's lifetime. Bei Rav Chisda, smida lachalve. Smida is a very fancy flower. And even the dogs had it. Okay, so they must have had dogs. There were enough fancy flour for their dogs. V'lo misbebe, and no one wanted. Everyone had enough. However, Rabba nama disare le'inashe. Even the people had to eat bread from barley flour, very shvach. and v'lo mishtakach, and even that they didn't have enough. Okay, so what do you have over here? Mizoine, right? Chaye, and Bane.
Yeah, because that shit in
You basically have Bane Chaye and Mizoine here. And one lived a terrible life, physically, and one lived a very good life. They were both equal in schus. Is a raya that Bane Chaye and Mizoine don't depend on your schus. Rather, what does it depend on? Okay, so if you said that, even that is controversial enough. If you just said Bane Chaye and Mizoine don't depend on your schus, it depends on the Eibush, there are other things. Okay, even that we would say, one second, that's not what it says in the Torah. Right? How many psukim? Says, you can't do it, right? Even that would be better. Alachas kan when you add on top of it and say, and what is it yet, Talian? The astrology. It's a very, very shadda Gemara. Very shadda Gemara. Okay. What is the origin of the word? We'll deal with this, by the way. We have a wonderful mimer that Reb Marash where he explains this. Okay, we'll see. What is the origin of the word mazel? What does mazel mean? So, it means the heavenly bodies. But how?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, go.
No, I'm saying I don't want to. I'm sure there's a lot of Gemaras, and I don't know. But isn't there like in Megillah, in Mazal, the mazel season? Rashi says it's the neshama, isn't it? It's not.
I don't believe Rashi says. Rashi says the neshama?
Rashi says, what is Mazal?
Okay, so then it would mean in that context. If we say Mazlayu Chazi,
or like part of it.
when the Gemara says Avagav de Iuloi Chazi, Mazlayu Chazi,
Right.
so we need to look to see. Obviously, Chassidus teaches that it means a Shoyrish of the Neshama the way it's Lamaila. I didn't look up that Gemara to see how the Rishonim understand the word Mazel there. It's possible that it's not astrological. It's possible that it is. I would have to check. That's a great question, and I did not plan on dealing with it. We can come back next week, and if Bez Hashem, and we'll fill that in. That's a good order. Okay, so let's look at this pasuk that's talking about Yoshiyahu HaMelech, who, after many years and generations of Avodah Zarah, he v'hishpis as hakmarim, he got rid of the priests, asher nasnu malchei Yehuda, who were the kings of Yehuda that came before him, put all over Eretz Yisrael. And these priests, what they used to do, like Katar Ba'abamos, used to bring Ketores or Karbonis in these Bamas, which are not allowed to do, Ba'arei Yehuda, in the cities of Yehuda, Umesibe Yerushalayim, in the environs of Yerushalayim, Ves HaMekatrim. The priests also used to bring Karbonis La Baal, La Avodah Zarah, La Shemesh, V'la Yoreach, V'la Mazalis. That's where you have the word. And to the Mazalis, to the Chol Tzva Shema. This is very clear from the context. What's the Mazal here? Sun, moon, and the other famous planets that existed at the time. And that's the term. Oivdei akum. Oivdei koichavim u'mazalos. Koichavim is a star. Mazalos is, as we'll see, it's specific to seven of the more famous planets. And that's what mazalos means, to mention planets. Now, Shaila is, why is it called mazalos? What does the word mazal have to do with a planet? So there's two interpretations. One we get from the Radak. The Radak, Reb David Kimchi, we all know him as the commentator on the Torah. Nach, but also wrote a Pirush on the Torah. He also wrote a book called Sefer HaShiroshim, which is basically a dictionary. Very important work. And under the Erech Nezel, right, it's on Nun Zayin Lamed, he writes, he brings the Psukim. There's a pasuk that says, Harim Nozlu Mipnei Hashem, that mountains were flowing, or melting from Hashem. In Mipnei Hashem, that's in Shoiftim. Huh?
Shiva Stavola.
Yeshira Zoyra. Then you have Mayim Zorim Karim Noizlim, cold water flowing. Okay, so you see there's this word flowing. V'chulam Inyan Ha'agara, they're all about moving water. And that is the root of the word Lamazalos. Why? Because they flow in the sky. They're moving around, just like water flows. The planets flow in the sky, and that's why they're called Lamazalos. That is Radak's interpretation. The Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah has an anonymous pirush around, instead of the Kesef Mishnah, who wasn't going to write a commentary on the Daled Yesodis and the Galgalim and the planets. Instead, you have a pirush there in Kiddush HaChodesh. You have it, and Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. It's not entirely clear who wrote it. And there he talks about Mazalis, and he writes as follows: Kfar biyarnu milas Mazalis, I already explained. V'nikru kach, it's called this, Lefisha Hashemesh v'ayarech mahalchim bahem oikaramim, because the sun and moon go in them or near them, and so because the sun and the moon go near or near them or in them, therefore the targum v'yelech is v'azal. So v'azal is negate. Now here I need to explain what is he talking about, and here will be the time to actually, it's going to be relevant in a moment, just to clarify a point. There's many different types of astrology, and the astrology that we mostly find in Chazal is very different from the astrology we have today. So what's the astrology that we have, the general astrology that's out there today, is you open the newspaper, and it basically says that if it goes by the month. If you were born on, if you were born in the month, there's 12 different ones. Gemara almost never, maybe once or twice, speaks about that type of astrology. Gemara speaks about a different type of astrology. The hour you were born, which planet's in control? Wasn't it? We asked, what do you mean, which planet's in control? Okay, so that's one of the basics in astrology is that, every hour there's another planet that's in control. So that's called a Mazel Shah. And it's about one specific planet. So right now, we're between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock on Tuesday evening. So right now, this is what it is a way of figuring out, according to the Gemara, Jupiter, now is the hour of Jupiter. We all know, on Friday, between 6 and 7 o'clock, that's an hour, that's Mars. Madin is Mars. We'll soon see. So that's the Mazalis, the astrology that Chazal spoke about, is that the idea, 1 hour under the dominion of one star. More or less, that is what was spoken about.
I think the one that they have in the paper is the same thing. It's just that they can't write everyone's hours. They just do a general for the month.
Here's the way I understand it. There's another system that goes as the zodiac. What's the zodiac? Already from ancient times, they looked up in the sky, see a lot of different stars. But they also came up with the idea that at different times of the year, there's a different tzura, there's a different type of shape that you have in the thing. If you look up in this month, it looks like this. If you look up in this month, it looks like this. And they gave names based on the imagery. Some of them taka look like it, some of them don't look like this. There's a mazel shur and there's a mazel dog, and these are the Hebrew words for it, but in other cultures they use their words for it. So that's 12, and the idea is, so tomorrow morning, obviously you can't see it now, but the stars have a certain seer tonight, and tomorrow morning the sun is going to be coming up, and so it passes through that shape, that cluster of stars that takes up a certain shape. So that's the mazalis that they're talking about, is that, and that's why it stays the same for a month. So like you're born in a certain month, also you were born under that particular seer, and so that has its own particular meaning. But that's what he's referring to here when he says the sun and the moon go in them. What does it mean? The sun and the moon don't go in a particular planet, but it goes in them, meaning in the seer of the cluster of the zodiac of the different stars that are there. Okay. This is almost very rarely the Chazal speak about that type of astrology, the influence of a cluster of stars rather than an individual one. All right, let's go further in the Gemara. So we saw in the Gemara two main ideas. One, Rav Yosef, what he did. Another one, Rava's teaching about the different destiny between the two rabbis, where he introduced the word mazel. And now we come to the following Gemara. Here is the famous sugya about astrology, is in Gemara Shabbos, Taf Kuf Nun Vav. It's a long sugya, and we're going to learn some of the key pieces. Amlu Rabbi Chanina said to them, to the Talmidim, Paiku Emaru Levar Levoi, go tell Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Loi Mazel Yoim Goyim, as Ella Mazel Shah Goyim. Mazel Yoim doesn't matter. What matters is the Mazel Shah. Mazel Shah, I just explained what it is, and then he's gonna go on and on to explain what that means. But between a certain hour, there's one planet that dominates. That's Mazel. That's the important thing. Go tell Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Why Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi? Because Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had a different shitta. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had a shitta that goes by days, and there's nothing to do with really planets. He's like Sunday. If you're born on Sunday, you're this type of person. If you're gonna be born on Monday, you're this type of person. No, he doesn't connect it to the planets. So Rabbi Chanina comes and says, no, go tell him. It's not about if you're born on Sunday or Tuesday, whatever. It all goes by the hours, and it's astrological. It has to do with the planets. And here he gives a list. Zok Rabbi Chanina. If you're born during the hour that the sun is in control, then Yehei Gvar Ziv Sun. You're going to be a person. Look under. I put Rashi indented. Ziv Sun Zok Rashi Keshemesh Hamer. You're going to be shiny. It makes sense. If you're born in an hour that the sun is in control, and the sun is shiny, is a ball of fire, so you're gonna shine. Now, what does it mean? You're gonna shine. It's a very vague term. We don't know, but that's you're gonna shine. You're gonna eat and drink your own stuff. Zok Rashi, what does that mean? Kishemesh, just like the sun, which doesn't encroach on his friend's territory, Limshal Balayla, to come out at night. The moon, although its time is when nighttime. Sometimes you look up in the sky in the day, you're able to see the moon. So in other words, it encroaches, it eats cake that doesn't belong to him. The day is the cake, and the moon comes and is eating. The sun, you'll never see the sun at night. So in other words, he stays. Shilas. Okay, I hear. You never see the sun by night. No, you can maybe just like you see the moon by night. Maybe you could come up with a seer that you could see it. I don't know. And so therefore, what does that symbolize? This person, he's not going to be eating from other people's territory. This person is going to eat and drink of his own. Weiter sagt die Gemara, v'razoi galyon. What does that mean? His secrets are going to come out. Zok Rashi, he's never going to be able to keep his secrets concealed. The sun is out in the open, and everyone knows about it. This person also, the National Enquirer is going to find out, and everything's going to be out in the open. In Ganav, if he steals, lo matzlach, he's not going to be successful if he does gneva. Why? Because everything is in the open by him, so therefore he's not going to be shaykh to get away with his geneva. Okay, so that is your astrological prediction if you're born under the hour when the star is in position. I'm sorry, it's the last one. Next he goes, Haiman de b'choichav noiga. Noiga, what is that? That's Venus, which is called noiga. Noiga means shiny, bright. Why is it called bright? Because it happens to be the brightest planet in our solar system. So, Haiman de B'cheichav Noiga, Yehegvar Atir is going to be a rich person. Vizano Yeh, and he's going to be Mizane. That's not sneeze. That's kind of like sinful. Okay, my timer. Why? Mishum the Tali Bei Nura. Because fire is in that planet, and somehow that resembles the fire or the passion of the Yetzer Hara, and so therefore he's going to end up involved in promiscuous activity. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Haiman de b'choichav. Choichav is Mercury. Yehegvar Nohir. So the Rashash makes a good argument that the pshat over here is that he's going to have a good memory. Sometimes the Gemara uses that term. V'chakim, and wise. Why? Mishum the Sofra dechamu, because he's like the secretary of the sun. What does that mean? The secretary usually is a wise guy, right? Because he is of the king. The Chama is like the king, and he's the secretary of the king. Zok Rashi, Mazal Koichavu Sofer Shamazal Chama. It's the secretary of the Chama. Lichtov Derech Hilucha Utkufay, of writing down how the sun is going and its orbits. And he's always next to him. What's happening here, basically, I don't know these things, but it seems that Mercury is somehow close to the sun. And so because it's close to the sun, it looks like there's the boss, and then there's this planet trailing him, just like a boss and a secretary is trailing. And so therefore he's going to be a smart person, because obviously a boss hires a smart secretary who has a good memory. And so that's why if you're born under the influence of Mercury, this is your destiny. Weiter. Haiman de Bolvana, if it's the moon, Yegval Sover Marin. You're going to be a person who's going to suffer bad, hardship. Bane Vesasar. You're going to build and it will be destroyed. Sasar Ovane. Things will be destroyed, but you'll rebuild. Rashi. Sovel Marin. Kilvanazu Shamisnavna Voelechas. You're going to suffer just like the moon dwindles in the second half of the month. Banoi Vesasar. Zakrashi Kolvanazu Shagdelo Mismaetas. Like the moon, it expands and it gets smaller. So too, you're going to build and destroy. Achel de la delay v'shased de la delay. Zakrashi Kilvana Hamasegas Gvulachama. Just like the moon, which encroaches on the territory of the sun, Limshal Afayim to also come out by day. So too, you're going to eat food that doesn't belong to you. You're going to drink that doesn't belong to you. V'razoi Kasyan. You're going to be able to keep your secrets hidden. Why? Kilvana Shenamira, because you don't have light. And so therefore, you're going to be able to, the Levana, of course the Levana has light. Either Rashi means it doesn't have independent light, or he means it's not a very strong light. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, you'll be able to keep your secrets. In Gun of Matzach, if you steal, you get away with it. Perfect crime. Okay. Haiman Dibshabsoi, that's Saturn. Yegvar Machshavse B'tolin. His plans are going to come to naught. So Rashi here explains, B'telin K'may Lo Yishboisu. He wants you to know that the Yishboisu, the etymology of the word Shabbos means bottle. And so that's why we're saying that if you're born under the influence of that planet, that's what's going to happen. But that's pretty negative, like all your plans are going to come to naught. The East Amri, some people offer a different interpretation. Kol demachashin alei batlin. All the people planning and scheming against you, it's going to come to nothing. So in other words, no one's going to be able to harm you. Haiman de B'tzedek, Jupiter, ye gvar tzidkon. You can already see the word tzedek. I don't know how it got the name Tzedek. It's not like Tanakh gave it the name tzedek. Chazal used the word tzedek. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg. But anyway, so because it's tzedek, so Gavar Tzidkin can be a tzaddik. What do we mean tzaddik? The tzaddik be mitzvahs. He's going to be a tzaddik in mitzvahs. Righteous, I guess tzidkin means righteous. Righteous in what sense? In mitzvahs. Zok Rashi, tzaddik be mitzvahs. Stakalaniim. When we say mitzvahs, it doesn't mean all the mitzvahs. It means tzedakah. The karlei mitzvah b'chol lashon agada, because in agadata we just refer to tzedakah as a mitzvah. This is very interesting because there's a quote from Alter Rebbe in Tanya where he says that mitzvah b'chol lashon Yerushalmi refers to tzedakah in Perek Lamed Zayin, I think. So here we see it's actually, you already see it in the Bavli. I don't know, maybe the Rebbe has ha'or on this. You already see it in the Bavli. Rashi here says that stam tzedakah here means mitzvah. Okay. Haiman Madim, and here comes Mars. Yegvar Oshe Daman. Mars is a red planet. Not surprisingly, this person is going to be a spiller of blood. I took out a famous line that comes after this because I want to save that for later. Okay. Amar Rabba. No, but that is going to be relevant soon. Actually, you'll see. It's actually relevant right now. Amar Rabba. Rabba said, "Why are you saying that if you're born under Mars, you are going to be a spiller of blood? Anaba Madim Havoy. I was born under the influence of Mars." And so now how does Rabba know that? So obviously it means he was into this. He calculated. He wanted to know what his horoscope was. By the way, horoscope, just hour, scope, look. Scope, Mount Scopus, Soifim, look, hour. So horoscope means looking into the hours. It actually is a very masim word for Chazal, where you have mazel sho'os. Okay. Omar Abayas, huh?
Did you just say horoscope is about the month?
Yeah. So I don't know. Omar Abaya. So Abaya tells Rabba, Mar name onesh v'kotil. You also punish and kill. You also punish and kill. What does that mean? So look at Rashi. Rashi says, Onish. What does that mean? Yeah, you're the Rosh Yeshiva, and in Babel you had power. It's not like a Bezdin today. Then they had real power, and yeah, in times of the Gemara they even did the death penalty sometimes. So you punish Bnei Adam or other things, or other punishments that we see that Chazal sometimes used in the time. So this is what Abaye is saying. You punish. Now, B'Pashtus Rashi is explaining Onesh v'Kato. Although his Dibur HaMaskil is only on Onesh, but Pashtus is going on both. And what he's saying is that you punish, and while you're punishing, you also kill. So there's a Rav by the name of Shmuel Hillman. Shmuel Hillman was the Shver of Yitzchok Isaac Halevi Herzog. Yitzchok Isaac Halevi Herzog was the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, before 48 and then after 48. And Rabbi Herzog had a strong kesher with the Fidik Rebbe, and his father had a kesher with the Rebbe Rashab. So Rabbi Herzog's Shver was Rabbi Hillman. I believe that's how Rabbi Herzog ended up where he is, because Rabbi Hillman was a big Goin. He learned of Volozhin and whatever. And then, unlike most of his peers who became Aguda, he became Mizrahi and very pro-Zionist. And so that's why they don't talk about him so much in the Yeshiva Welt. But he wrote Svarim, and one of his Svarim on the Masechah Shabbos, he writes, maybe you could say, Onesh is one thing, you punish. And when you punish, sometimes there's blood spilling there. And by the way, you also kill. Where do you kill? Kam Rabba v'shachta l'Reb Zera. That's his argument. Kam Rabba v'shachta l'Reb Zera. Because we have that famous story and thing, so maybe it is connected to Madim. I believe the Rebbe references this in the Sikha, but I didn't have the chance to look it up before the class. I don't know what direction the Rebbe goes there. Okay, so we just did a big sugya, a piece of Gemara. What did it do? It refers to 7 heavenly bodies. These are the 7 planets that Chazal always spoke about, the Shiva Koichei Leches, these specific 7. Not all of the planets that we talk about today are in this list. We have the sun, we have the moon, and another 5 that are mentioned over here. And it basically says that this has influence. This is Rab Chanina talking, and it says this has influence on the people in 2 ways. Breaks down in 2. Number 1, personality. Pasha personality. So what does personality mean? Character. Smart, not smart. Emotional, right? Destiny. Rich or not rich. Successful, not successful. Morality. The 3rd one. Morality. Znos, no znos. Tzedakah, no tzedakah. Right? So you can break it down into those 3 categories. You have character or general makeup of the person. You have destiny. And you have morality. All 3 of them being dictated by the mazel under which a person is born. And the last piece, just of exploring different teachings from Chazal on Mazalis, is the concept of a birthday. This we all heard the term Mazali Gover, Mazali Gover. Where does this term come from? It actually comes from the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi has many fewer teachings, astrological teachings about it. Bavli has a lot. Yerushalmi has very little. That's an interesting discussion why that may be, but Yerushalmi is also smaller, so that may be part of the reason. And here you have Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say. Remember, Yeshua ben Levi is the one who believed in the day concept, okay? And that plays a role here. He says, Amalek kushvan haya. He was a mechashef. He said, what did Amalek do when he went to war against the Jewish people? He would put up people on their birthday to fight, I guess, in the front lines. Loimar saying, not too quick that you will fall on the day of your birthday. Okay, fine. So right now there's nothing astrological about this. But then look, the piece goes weiter. Ma'asa Moshe, what did Moshe do? Irveives hamazalos. He mixed around the mazalis. He made a miracle, or whatever that means. He moved around the planet. So all of a sudden, what was Amalek doing according to this teaching? He was trying to align it with the planets. So here's where you come with the idea that you put up someone on their birthday. Why? Because on their birthday, somehow their mazel is there, protecting them and giving them strength. The mazel, some astrological, some bodily, heavenly body is giving them power. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes, and by somehow mixing it up and saying that, again, what to say there was is not entirely clear, he ruined his plans. It is interesting, it's the day. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is talking about the day. Remember, Yeshua, it's not in the piece. But Rabbi Chanina told him, no, it's the hour that matters, it's not the day. And here it is the day, and we'll come back to that later, because the Rebbe has spoke many sikhs on this. Oh, I missed the text. Okay, so let's go back to 10. Once you stop here, you already understand where Mazel Tov comes from, and I'll show you evidence that Mazel Tov originally was not anything but a prayer. Where do you see that? Sefer Chassidim. Sefer Chassidim is a work from Chassidei Ashkenaz about 700-800 years ago in Germany, and they write like this: Isha yeshevas ala mashber, a woman who's about to give birth, imi b'cheder bnei adam b'bayis, she's in the room, and other people are in the house. So instead of wasting their time, Yavakshu ala rachman, they should daven for her. That's for her. V'ala yeled, they should daven for the other. What should the prayer be? Sheyulad b'mazel tov, that the child should be born under a good mazel. In other words, if the child's born 658, that's one mazel. 702 is another. And 702 is like a better mazel, or the other way around. And so you're davening that it'll be under... Why? Well, but after you learn this Gemara and Shabbos, it makes perfect sense. We want him not to be a Rasha. We want him to be a tzaddik. We want him not to be stupid. We want him to be smart. We want him not to be poor. We want him to be healthy. Right? Perhaps if you tie together what Rava said before about the destiny of the two rabbis, Zikr, you want him to have a mazel tov. Somehow, mazel tov moved away from a prayer. And it's interesting, you can only speculate about what the transition was. Because I could imagine a transition like this. Oh, you had a baby? I'm sure, instead of a prayer, I'm sure it was born under a great mazel. There was probably a transition period. I'm sure, mazel tov, I'm sure it was born under a great mazel or something like that. And then, used to be... Before they were born. Yeah, Sefer Chassidim is before, which is a prayer. Okay, but now the baby's already born. So maybe it's like, I'm sure it was born under a great mazel, and then I could probably see that somehow it transitions to where it became today, of where it's mostly just a form of saying congratulations.
But even B'Shah Taiva, B'Shah could also, you can talk about the mazel.
B'Shah Taiva Matzlachas is definitely an origin, an astrological term.
Maybe once we're trying to do a question, like mix up the mazel in case it was bad. We're saying, no, we're going to change it. We'll make it a good mazel.
What do you mean?
Like if it was born a bad mazel, we're going to do like Moshe and change the mazel.
Change it. Yes, so you'll see. That's going to become very relevant. Well, Moshe changing the mazalas is going to become a major teaching weiter in the Gemara. Okay, so obviously there's more questions than answers that we're holding right now. In terms of understanding really what is going on over here. And it's going to take a while but let's continue. We still have some small issues that we need to deal with. Okay, the first thing, it's like a derech agav, is with the number. What's the issue with the number? The shaila is, why FSV7? It's pretty random. Why that V7? Okay, so the answer is that when Chazal spoke, everyone spoke about the 7 planets. They knew there were other stars. They spoke about these 7 planets. Later, there were other planets that were discovered. So there's a sefer that talks about this. Sefer is called Sefer Abris. It's a very interesting sefer. We'll talk about this for a second. I think that Rebbeim were not so happy about this sefer. Why do I say that? Three things. Number one, there's a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe during the war in Tafshin Beis. Someone wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe that he's in Yiddish. Learned Sefer Abris. He's learning Sefer Abris. Let me tell you what Sefer Abris is. It's a Talmud of the Gra. The Gra, it seems, encouraged on some level that people should get involved. His Talmud should get involved in the sciences, and so he did, and he wrote a whole sefer that's about the science of his day, connecting it with Torah. And I didn't read much of it, so I can't tell you much beyond that. His name was Pinchas Eliyahu Horowitz. You see the date of the printing, Tav Kuf Nun Zayin, right? That's Alter Rebbe's time. Tav Kuf Nun Zayin, the year the Tanya was printed. Okay. So, like this. So, the Yid who tells the Frierdiker Rebbe during World War II that he's learning Sefer Abris, it was, by the way, it was translated into Yiddish. People wanted to disseminate it, get it out to the masses, so it was translated into Yiddish way back in the 1800s. So I'm learning Sefer Abris, and the Chava Shaila, so Shaila, he turned to the Frierdiker Rebbe, so he wrote a letter to Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe answered his question about what he was saying. It was a Shaila about the Nefesh, because he also talks about the Nefesh. There, he answers the question. Then he says like this: if you have a shir already in Chumash and in, I don't remember the things, and in Mishnayos with the Tosfos Yontif and the Rali, he gives him a list and Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, then fine. But if not, and this is taking a precedence over that, then it's Nishkin Seder, and you have to learn the basics first. This is not so important. That's number one. Number two is the Tzemach Tzedek brings the Sefer Abris and Sefer HaChakira. Tzemach Tzedek, when he went to Petersburg, he did research and all the questions in philosophy and Nevuchim, all these things to address it when he was going to be there. Most of the book is dealing with the question that Aristotle said the world was never created, it always existed, and the Tzemach Tzedek bringing from all the sources in Nishtazai. Okay, so it was a time they didn't learn it. The Rebbe Shab Sindi wasn't so happy that it got out because it was printed by someone else. But Paul the Rebbe printed it. The Rebbe printed in Tafshin Tazvav, the Rebbe printed the whole thing. In this Sefer, Tzemach Tzedek brings, and he says, by the way, Sefer Abris says so-and-so, but really, it was already said by the Rasag, and he writes, Sefer Abris pretends like he didn't see it in the Rasag and writes it on his own. Okay, it's not a thing that you see very often. And then there's a Shema from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he writes about a group of how someone from Berlin and from Moses Mendelssohn's circle came to Vilna and convinced Talmud Chacham to go to Berlin to learn the sciences. And he says, and this Rabbi Horowitz went together with other people, and they went there. And so you see, there was a little. The Rabbeim were probably not too excited about this sefer. Anyway, what does he say over here? See, I'm not going to read the whole thing inside, but I'm going to paraphrase what he's saying. He's like, why are we only talking about 7 stars? Today, the astronomers say that we have 8 planets. And there he says that affects Galgalim, which we're not going to get into. And he says, because in the year Tav Kuf Amal 1781, there was a Chacham, an astronomer whose name was Herschel. His name was William Herschel in England, and through a big, a telescope, he found another star that's going around Shabsoi, which Shabsoi was Saturn, around the sun, and the name is Uranus. So why are we not counting that? So he says, look, there are a lot of stars that are even higher than Uranus, and he says, and we can't see them. And it's possible, he says, and in a later generation, they're going to come and they're going to find additional planets because they're going to have better equipment, Sterngläser, that we have today, which is indeed what happened. After that, they found Pluto and another planet which was discovered later. He says the Chachmei Yisrael knew about all of this, not by physical seeing, but by Ruach HaKodesh or by tradition. However, they never mentioned them because the ones that are higher than Saturn, the ones that are higher than Saturn don't really have an effect down here on this world, only a little, and only from time to time, and in very specific matters. But it's specifically these 7 ones that are from Saturn and below, because they're closer to Earth, therefore, and they have an effect on Earth, and we're even able to see the effect that they have. He goes and says the sun and the moon is obvious. What about the other ones? So this passage, he's not talking about astrology. He doesn't talk about astrology in his book, B'chlal. but he's still making his point, but that we still talk about these 7 as a unique group. So what Pu'ula do sun and the moon have? Clear, light. What are the other 5? So if you say astrology, good, then they have those influences. But if you're not going to write that, which he didn't want to write, so what do? So he went into something else, alchemy. Alchemy basically is that there's 7 metals. And the 7 metals in this ancient way of thinking is rooted in the 7 planets. And then there's a way of taking one metal and changing it into another. There were many people who tried taking one metal and making concoctions and turning it into gold, and they thought they were going to strike it rich. And this was a whole science that existed back in the day. So he says that's the effect the metals, those planets have on the metal, on the 7 different metals. And he says this is why the Chachamim didn't mention them. Okay, so we're really getting here. The reason I'm bringing this in is because the obvious question when you hear about planets having an influence in an astrological model, within that model, what would be an explanation for why these 7? So this you could use as explanation. These are close, and because they're close, they have a pula. The ones that are further away, they don't have a pula, and that's that. Okay, let's now move to a very important part of the class, and that is there are major challenges with everything that we just learned. There are major challenges with everything that we just learned. It seems, in fact, to run contrary to the fundamentals of Judaism. And in fact, there are 3 ikrim from the Rambam, that seem to be in jeopardy based on what we learned. Why? So, one of the ikrim of the Rambam is that we only worship God, and we don't worship any of the malachim and the koichavim and anything like that. Why? Because they don't have any shilton and no bechira. They have no control. Those words Rambam says is they have no control. Here, it sounds like the planets do have control. They're controlling a lot that happens in this world. That's challenge number 1. It seems like, even if you're not going to worship the star, but even attributing control to the star sounds like a problem. Number 1. Number 2, prophecy. The 6th principle is that this prophecy. What was prophecy? Prophecy doesn't sound so unique anymore. In fact, you have stagnine paroi that are able to do pretty much the same thing that a Navi is able to do. So all of a sudden, this nevuah, which sounds like such a special Jewish thing, doesn't seem like it's so special anymore. Next, the 11th principle. What's the 11th principle? Is about reward and punishment. And this seems to be jeopardized in 2 ways. Number 1, we saw, the Gemara says, it doesn't go by schus. It goes by your mazel. Okay, what's reward and punishment? Reward and punishment means that it doesn't, at least officially, you say what you observe, at least officially it works that, and it works out, and if not, not. So here, if the yisoid is that you get gemul toiv l'misha mekayim mitzvahs hatayra, here it doesn't sound that way. It sounds like it all depends on what mazel you're born under. More important, in addition, although the Rambam doesn't specify it in the 13 principles of faith, it's also neged to the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Mishnah Torah, the Rambam says, you can't have schar and oynish if you don't have what? Chira chavshis. Schar and oynish means that you had a choice, and you made a choice. And therefore it becomes a whole shaila by Paroi. How can we punish Paroi? God made him. And so the Rambam struggles with it. He spends a half a parak in Rambam dealing with this issue, dealing with this challenge. And how can you punish Paroi if he didn't have a choice? Okay, here it sounds like, mazol, this means we don't have a choice. This guy was born to be a zanoi. This guy was born to be a tzadkan. So, weiter schar and oynish doesn't work. Why? Because you pulled out the fundamental pillar, which is what? Which is chira chavshis. So really, there are 4 issues that need to be resolved. They are, again, ein lahem shiltain. Here we're giving them shiltain. Nevuah, well, how's this different? Number 3, here it seems that there is no schar and oynish, and there is no chira chavshis. These are the challenges.
Shilton, you could say the same thing about anything that has a function. Trees, you could say also, they give fruit. Because they have the power doesn't mean that they have the choice.
Yeah. So the first one is the easiest one to answer, and that we'll deal with right now. As you're saying, you made a good point. When Yidden believed in astrology, they never believed that the planet actually controls the mashal. If you walk out when it's to your point, if you walk out when you walk out and the sun, and you go to the beach, and you get a sunburn. Like, oh, the sun had a pula. Yeah, the sun had a pula. Yeah. Oh, you get a shiltain. No, there's no shiltain. The sun had a pula. What's the key? The sun didn't choose. The sun doesn't have a choice. The Eibusher gave it a teva, and the teva is that it causes a sunburn. That's the teva that the Eibusher embedded into the sun. And so once you say that, you can also say that the Eibusher embedded another teva. That was There's other rays that somehow come out of the sun that we don't see and that we don't observe, and that they have an effect on a person. And so, so long that we're not saying that the sun is choosing, then you don't have an inyan, you don't have an issue of Avodah Zarah whatsoever. Exactly as you said with your mashal there. A tree you sit under the tree, it's shady, right? So if you're born under the tree, you're born in a shady place, right? So these things have but there's no bchira to these things. They're not making choices, so you don't have that issue of Avodah Zarah. Okay, it's important to say this. Why is it important to say this? Because there were models of astrology by Umas Olam where Befedish was in an ofen, it was linked, that they are making choices. And so therefore this point is an important point.
Doesn't the Rambam also say that the results have like a personality?
Yes, and that would make it even more complicated, because the Rambam says that all of the heavenly bodies are conscious beings. This is very controversial. Some of the other Gedolei Yisrael disagreed. The Maharal disagreed with the Rambam on this, as did some others. But the Rambam did say that that they were conscious beings. So that would only lend itself more to the problem. But we'll see. The Rambam doesn't believe in any of this. Rambam thinks this whole thing is bonkers, as we'll soon see. Not soon, as we'll see next week. So therefore, for him, it's not really an issue.
But he's also the one who said that they have personality.
They have personality, but they have no influence in any of this astrological sense, as we'll see. Obviously, that raises questions because the Gemara is saying, so how do you deal with that? So it's going to be a problem that we'll deal with next time. So anyway, you do have that. Just want to clarify one more point, and that is like this: when you speak about the influence of the planets that they have on people, you could say it in two oifanim. One is the way I said it before. The rays that come out of the sun, so they have an effect on the skin. So there's also other effects that you don't see, that if you're born, and there's hours, so then it has a pull and it has a cause on you. That's one way of saying it, where you're looking at the planet almost as a goyrim. It's like a cause. There's another way of understanding this whole sugya also within this framework, and that is not so much like that. That is a little more, I can't say I saw Chassidus saying this, but I learned to Sikh the Rebbe where he was talking about this within this model, and the mashmals was a little different. And it goes something like this. Every hour, there is a different hamshacha that's coming into the world. And that hamshacha has implications. One of the implications is that a certain planet is in charge. And another implication of that hamshacha is that people are born in this way or in that way or whatever it is. So it's not like the planet is causing it. The better mashal would be the planet's more like a watch. A watch doesn't cause the time, but a watch tells you, it's 4 o'clock, it's about to get dark. So these planets would be more symbols for the idea that there's certain energies that are coming into the world that are having this pull-up. But at the end of the day, in this model, those planets are good indicators for that. Okay, and we're going to see when the Rambam doesn't like this model, he's not going to even like that. He's not going to accept this idea that they're even indicators for anything of the sort. Okay, so let's summarize. What do we do today? We basically saw that there's astrology in so many different places and in so many different ways in Chazal. We mentioned the 4 challenges. We only answered the first one. It's not Avodah Zarah. We still have our questions. What's about Nevuah? What's about Bchira Chavshis? What's about Schar and Oynish? How do we make sense of those types of teachings? You already know that the Rambam is going to reject this entire model, which then going to raise the question, how does he deal with what Chazal we're saying? So all of that we're going to try to get to next week. All right.